Oh yeah, let's go. It's so good today. No, look at that poor little girl trying to hold that wheel all by herself. Oh my God, look. Oh, it's Jared. Taylor, how come you're letting that girl hold that wheel? Oh shit, sorry. Hey guys, what's going on? It's Alex from Fitment Industries, and today we're gonna be talking about coilovers. So we made a video a couple months ago talking about breaking down a coilover, and had a lot of math, it had a lot of different definitions and how things work. And you guys got a little confused, I got a little bit confused, and overall, coilovers as a whole are kind of a very sophisticated aftermarket, component of your car. So we thought we would actually just talk about coilovers to help give you just a little bit more knowledge about the basics of what they are and what they're intended to do. So coilovers as a whole have been something that have existed in the game for, I'd say, a pretty long time. When you consider the fact that coilovers are inherently from the racing community, they do have a lot of function. We talked about in the past how lowering your car is probably one of the best things you can do, and one of the first things that you should do, if you head over to fitmentindustries.com and pick up some suspension. Wink is for the plug, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. There's the other plug so that we can keep making cool videos like this. Where was I going? Coilovers as a whole have been one of those things that has great form and great function. It makes your car look better, it makes your car perform better, it makes your car feel better, and everything in between. Coilovers originated a long time ago actually in the racing circuit that allowed racing teams to adjust suspension on the fly on what they needed to do depending on the track that they were at. Over time, coilovers were naturally a very expensive component, but just like everything in the world, as more competitors got into the scene, they obviously got more and more affordable. To this day, coilovers are probably one of the biggest things and are considered the reason that lowering springs ultimately got shut out in the mid-2005. So coilovers as a whole are a very cool part, and what they are is just essentially a replacement for your stock suspension components, usually your strut and your spring. So there are multiple types of coilovers. You have your OEM style spring shock assemblies, you have your slip fit coilovers, and you have your full bodied coilovers. Now, your OEM style assemblies are just pretty much based off a conventional shock strut assembly that's surrounded by its own coil spring. They're typically non-adjustable, and they have fixed length bodies. So fixed length bodies just pretty much means that if you look down here, this piece will actually twist either way. Those ones don't have that. So you're probably not really that common with that kind of coilover, and predominantly nobody really is or runs them. The second type of coilover that you have is what's called a slip fit, and a slip fit coil pretty much just consists of like a hollow threaded tube. It slips over and sits on an existing shock perch, and then with jam nuts, it will compress and decompress its own spring to alter ride height. Now, you might be wondering, what does that mean? Well, that's a pretty good question. It pretty much just allows you to dump your car. It doesn't have that many performance modifications to it. It's strictly for an aesthetic point of view. Now, that gets us to the third and probably the one that 99% of you know about, and that is just your full bodied replacement coilover system. Now, these guys actually fully replace usually the spring and shock of your suspension system. They're overall the most customizable, they do the most, they're the most exciting to look at, they're kind of confusing when you do stare at them. Now, these are Silver's coilovers. So if you guys didn't know, we actually host Silver's. It's a great brand for pretty much any application. They have so many different makes and models, and they're actually a pretty good price. So we have Tane, we have Eibach, but we also have Silver's. These things are around $1,100. These are for a Mazda Miata. That's why they're so small. It makes me look like I actually have muscles when I pick it up with one hand, which is entirely not the case. Higher end full body coilovers feature like lower bodied and lower mounts that can be screwed in and out to further ride height adjustment. They have all sorts of different things. They can include bump stops, dust boots, and upper mount assemblies. Pretty much everything that you would need to have in terms of like a fully customizable part that won't necessarily break the moment that you put it in and will actually last quite a long time. So the shock body is the heart of the coilover, and that's what's gonna actually do a lot of the work. It helps eliminate oscillations and vibrations and tilting and rolling and all sorts of stuff, and it pretty much controls it all inside the shock body. So the rocking, the pitching, the dipping, all of that stuff essentially gets harnessed inside the shock body, and then it gets controlled with different types of viscous fluids. So inside the shock body is a hydraulic fluid filled tube and piston. The piston pushes that high pressure fluid through the shock valve, and that controls how it responds to the spring. Kinetic energy is harnessed through the movement, turns into heat energy, which sounds really, really fancy, but it's actually not that fancy, that dissipates within the shock fluid. So the shock fluid essentially acts as a harness for the energy to help dissipate the heat, dissipate the movement, all the stuff that's happening inside. And then what also happens is that you have that piston that has little tiny holes in it, or sometimes it's different different assembly depending on the make and manufacturer that will help control that and how much fluid will pump forward and backward to essentially alleviate, increase, or decrease the amount of pressure and the amount of strength required to move the actual spring or to move the suspension component as a whole. Now, every suspension component is different, so don't be in the comments talking about, well, mine does this or mine does that. There's so many different ways that coilovers are made that really, if you're thinking that yours does things one way, there's probably about 20 other brands out there that do it differently. Because at the end of the day, the simple way to put this in here is that the movements get controlled within either the spring or the shock body and gets controlled with a bunch of other really small things. You're talking about your rebound, you're talking about your compression and things like that, that ultimately increase or decrease ride quality depending on the responsiveness that you want from your coilovers. Wow, that is a lot of really fancy words to say. All this stuff in here helps increase or decrease your ride quality depending on if you just want to slam your car to the ground or if you want something that has a little bit of track function. So coilovers nowadays are typically offered in two different configurations. You have your monotube and then you have your twin tube, and that's an argument in and of itself. There's two different types. People argue that one is better than the other, but we're pretty much just going to give you the basic rundown of the differences between the two. So the first one is a monotube. Now, monotube shocks have a piston and rod assembly, and it's pretty much just housed in the damping case. So it's housed just singularly in one piece. So you don't have that second reservoir or anything like that. It's usually relatively what most entry to mid-level coilovers will sit at is a monotube assembly. Now, you also have a twin tube, which essentially is a twin tube shocks that has two cylinders. One is an inner cylinder where the piston and shaft move up and down, while the outer cylinder is the hydraulic fluid reservoir, and that's the fancier one. That's usually the one that's more expensive. You're gonna see that on the KWV3s. You're gonna see that on a whole bunch of different suspension. If you really wanna pay a lot of money, maybe you wanna put some motons or something like that, you're just feeling frisky and you really wanna win that HPD event, you're likely looking at more twin tube applications. Plus, twin tube shocks allow for increased piston stroke, which helps with ride quality and handling, and it's a whole bunch of fancy ways just to say that it does a little bit more. But in terms of the quality of what coilovers will do over time is pretty simple. If you get coilovers, you're gonna see your responsiveness do this. Now, when you look at monotube to twin tube, you're probably gonna see this. And the difference between the two is gonna be very minuscule unless you're really diving into the intricacies of coilovers, because these are probably one of the coolest, niftiest tools that you can have for your car, and definitely something I would recommend for anybody that's looking to modify their car. That coilovers are just such a great way to go. Now, air suspension is out there. That's a very cool system. It works great, but ultimately, if you're looking to dive into coilovers and something like that, these are just such a nifty tool that just get the job done, and depending on how much you pay is ultimately going to determine how fancy these things really are. Now, you might be thinking that we're skimming over a couple things, or you really want us to talk about twin tube coilover assemblies, but I can almost promise you that there's not a lot of people out there watching this that are running a twin tube assembly, and if there are, I'm sure you'll let me know in the comment section, because you guys do anyway, even if we want you to or not, because you guys like to talk to us, and that's super cool, and we appreciate it. If you made it this far, just be sure to subscribe and check out fitmentindustries.com. That's the whatever, we're moving forward. So if you're looking to set up your coilovers and you want some tips, just remember that before you install them, each spring needs to be slightly and equally preloaded. Don't let them just float around willy-nilly before you throw them in. That's just not the way that you want to do it. After that, thread the lower shock mounts onto their body in equal amounts. You want to make sure that when you're actually installing these, that they're at equal amounts. You can just use a tape measure and it's going to work great. It doesn't have to be perfect, but get it as close as you can. And then of course that you're just installing it correctly with the appropriate torque specs. You want to make sure that things are just assembled correctly. This is what connects what you feel to the road. And if you cheap out, or if you go the easy way out and you don't install it correctly, you're going to feel it pretty much immediately, because it's going to be a terrible ride quality. And the biggest two things to remember is that if you want to lower your car, you do it by lowering and using the lower shock mounts. Don't use the actual preload springs to achieve that lower ride height unless the lower mounts are completely maxed out. Now, there are people in the comment section last time that were like, no you can, no you can't. And in our eyes, it's not that you can or can't, it's that you shouldn't. This is the whole point of having a full-bodied coilover that has an adjustable lower mount. You want to use this first before you even start playing around with this, and even then we'd recommend that you probably don't do that. There are certain companies like Silvers that offer what are called ultra low that will actually get you a much lower look if that's what you're looking for, so that you can have a slammed car or something like that, and then you're not messing with preload or anything in between. If you guys are wondering why coilovers are such a big deal, I hope that we've covered it by now, because coilovers have a cool history with the racing heritage. They have awesome sort of technology that's allowed them to become way more affordable. You can pick up a set of Tane for $400. You can pick up a set of Qual quality silvers for like $1,100. You can pick up anything in any price range now, and everything about these coils are just absolutely killer. And if you guys really want to understand how these work, you got to start with the basics, and you just got to start by buying them and installing them correctly and then just seeing what it feels like. If you guys haven't had a set of coilovers yet, come on. Let's be real. So that is what we're talking about. That's Let's Talk About Coilovers. If you guys enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe. And of course, check out fitmentindustries.com if you're looking to pick up some coilover suspension, maybe you're looking to pick up some silvers or anything in between. And you know, drop a comment if you guys have questions. That's what we love about making these videos. I mean, it's just Gels and I out here trying to make some content. So if you guys want to see something different, let us know in the comment section. This was from one of our subscribers. So we hope you guys enjoyed. I'm Alex from Fitment Industries. If you're gonna be at SEMA, we will be there Tuesday, 4 p.m. We're gonna be having a meet and greet at the AccuAir booth. We'll actually probably drop the video talking about that. But I'm Alex from Fitment Industries. Come out and meet us and say hi for the 2 people that want to. I'm Alex. We'll see you later. Peace.